It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnett Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here.
With Barnett Bain. Good moment.
You're in a mood today.
I'm in a big mood today.
I'm nervous.
Well, you know, I feel like I have to be in a mood today.
Yeah.
Because I have a choice.
Yeah, talk to me about that.
I could either be in the mood, take it not too seriously, or I could take it too seriously.
Got it. Too
seriously. And that might not be a recipe for a happy day. So I am finding a balance. I'm finding the balance between letting things be real and also letting things be not too real.
It's that thin line between tragedy and comedy.
I don't know that line.
Dum-dum.
I don't know that line.
But
there sure
how
is a lot.
often what we're laughing at is actually tragic, and or vice versa, that there's something in the tragedy that can be seen from a perspective where we go, wow, you know, there's I don't know.
Wow, you lost me.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But
just that. So let me stay with the.
Yeah.
Not that it's really important. Maybe I should let it go. I'll let it go.
Good idea. Let it go.
Let it go.
No, trail back to it.
Maybe. You know what I wanted to bring up, because, and this is more on the serious side.
Yeah.
You said something to me this morning that I feel was
You owe me $10.
I owe you at least $10. I owe you, lunch at least.
Something like that. Is that what I said?
No, I'm just saying what you said was helpful in a way that I feel grateful. And you said something, and I'll tell the story in a way to disguise anybody involved. But a friend of ours, who's ridiculously talented, did an amazing performance, and you and I witnessed it, which we also witnessed, opened up some doors, opportunities. Big opportunities. And I didn't witness the second performance, but you did, and it went south. And you said something to me important. You said it felt like he was auditioning for the room. Like it wasn't his show. It wasn't like he was owning it. It's like he was trying to prove himself. And that word auditioning, because, you know, I was an actor for many years.
Drake Belson.
That's not the only thing I did.
But for those of our listeners who don't know that I work with Drake Belson.
Thank you very much.
Don't send me mail
for
Drake Belson.
Mail. Don't send anyone mail.
Yes, Freeman indeed played Drake Belson on the Young and the Oversexed.
Very oversexed. I did, as well as other things. But the auditioning, that to me, just that language, am I showing up with a sense of who I am, able to hold whatever projections, whatever opportunities may arise, without losing myself, without overthinking it, you know? Can I be spontaneous? Because, again, the first performance that we both saw was so spontaneous. It was so cool. And then we mentioned another performance for another friend of ours where you saw him click into, or you didn't see it, but anyhow, I saw him click into a kind of, he was just so free, and he took off his coat in the middle of the performance, and he was free in his body, and he was sincere, and it was a great performance. Even the word performance, it kind of makes me shudder. Like, is there a way, because we're both in a public, we're here on the radio and being taped, so it's going to be on YouTube or wherever it ends up going. Is there a way that I can be okay in my own skin and show up with whatever I know and whatever I don't know, and muddle through it with a kind of honesty and know that it's enough, versus the part of me that's always trying to audition and prove? To me, that strikes a place in my gut that I go, oh, it's so painful. You know what I'm talking about?
I think I do know what you're talking about.
That's good.
I think we're all heir to it, whether
Yeah.
we are performing in the theater arts or at a business meeting, in a relationship, on a date. We tend to watch ourselves.
Yeah.
We tend to be outside of ourselves, checking out, am I good enough? Am I skilled enough? Am I showing up correctly?
Yeah.
So we're not present in the moment.
Right.
We're not embodied. We can be, but it's pretty normal. It's pretty natural for us to meet new situations and to bring expectations of disappointment or of some sort of exercise in measuring how I am.
Well, the word that comes to mind for me is agenda. Is when I'm aware that I'm showing up with an agenda. I want to get something. I want to prove myself.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't usually go very well for me.
Well, I think it goes well if you can be aware of your agenda.
No, this is actually
if you're
a good
not
point.
aware of your agenda, then your agenda is expressed, or your agenda comes at you in the world as the way of the world,
Yeah.
and we feel at the effect of. But if we're aware of our agendas, then we can rise above them. We can include them. We can figuratively put the strong arms of love around them, not seek to deny them or suppress them, to hold them. And I say to myself, anybody who has had the life experience that I have had would have these feelings. That anybody who has learned to meet life in these particular ways would have these feelings about things. And so I'm developing increasing depths of compassion for those voices. And it's a work in progress. There's always the next thing.
Yeah.
There's always the next challenge. I have hay fever in this room today. We're facing right now in the news cycle, in the world, lots and lots of challenges, lots and lots of big challenges. We have all of this Middle Eastern stuff. We were talking about that as well from the perspective of performance. So here we have this crime that was committed last week of a country gassing its own people, chemical weapons, and taking out maybe somewhere, I've heard as many as 1,000 lives. And it's a horror. Absolutely, it's a horror. And now the world is rising up in righteous indignation about the horror. But I heard there are 40,000 lives that preceded the loss of the 1,000 lives. So those 40,000 taken out by guns and bullets and flamethrowers and bombs and knives and all manner of horrors.
Right.
But here we cross a line of this one is too horrible.
Right. So the first 40,000 weren't significant.
They weren't significant enough to gain the attention of the world in the way that this has. And perhaps it's wonderful that it has gained the attention of the world, and yet the world's response is bellicose and militant and for such interesting reasons that have to do with performance, a lot of them. That we hear things like, well, we have to respond because that's a line that's been crossed. The other lines, that wasn't the line that was been crossed, but this is the line. Or we have to respond because if we fail to respond, it will erode the prestige of the United States.
Well,
so this is a performance thing. So
that
it's not
really insipid
But I keep hearing it over.
No, I understand.
It's not even about what is going on there. It's about our prestige. Now this is a national version of auditioning and being out of the moment and having a look. How do I look, and how do I make that strategic for the stories from the past that I am expecting and throwing into the future? I'm not in the present. I'm not in the moment. So I am making choices that are not authentically born out of what in the East is called spontaneous right action. I'm making choices that are deliberated from patterns of the past and ways that I can assert control and dominance, and that I am going to out-Assad Assad.
Right. So it's the agenda.
It's the agendas.
And the agenda is, it's not about trying to help or how do we,
It is at a certain level.
I know that.
But ultimately, it's about how do I
That's the key
control.
thing. That's it.
How do I control
Yeah.
and how do I assert dominance in order to manipulate
That's
the
it.
world to conform to my desire? Not to say that it is the preferred outcome that lives are saved and this crisis of human dignity is met. Not to say that that isn't paramount.
Yeah.
But the methodology is it's not honest
It's not
for
honest.
us to say we're going to respond in order to preserve the prestige of the United States, in order so that we don't appear to the world to
Right.
to be
Weak.
weak and to be. This is a national vanity that's, frankly, I approach all these things as a personal shadow. So I look to
Yeah.
the places in me that line up with that and are triggered by that. And we began by talking about performance and performance anxiety. And there are so many places where I don't show up in the moment.
See, so, it's so interesting because even before that, we were talking about arrogance. And before we came on the air, like right when we were just hanging out in the studio talking a little bit, and I was saying that I was seeing a reflection of that in a particular dynamic in my life that was reflecting back to me where I get arrogant, where, again, am I engaged and present in whatever's going on, or am I worrying about my own, am I in my own agenda? Am I in my own self-image versus being present and really being in the let me be present to what's going on so I can be a source of something positive, right? Versus let me control it, manipulate it. And then what's really challenging for me, because as you know, I turned on the radio and was listening to, it wasn't Glenn Beck, but it was someone subbing for him on his show.
On our network.
On our network, on our station, indeed.
So said with respect.
Yeah. Anyhow, it was just the whole second guessing and the whole, because they were talking about this issue, and the war in the Beltway. Forget the war in the Middle East. It's the war in the Beltway. It's this constant war of trying to be right and one up, and it lacks intelligence, honestly. The whole conversation lacked thoughtfulness and care. It was about being right versus doing the right thing. It was really about, it was all disguised as we're trying to do the right thing, but it wasn't. It was about ego. It was about arrogance.
It is as developed and as pure, give or take on whatever the other agendas may be there, but in the full perspective of things, that is this consciousness of what can I do to fix something.
Yeah.
That is, it comes out of a desire to fix things. I always say on the show that
Which presumes that something's broken.
Well, things are broken. We're not in a non-dual world, and so I hear about these things. It's things are very, very, very broken indeed.
Right.
And if we were truly non-dual, they weren't. We wouldn't be broken. But it's no use talking about the PhD I'm going to have when I'm in the 5th grade. So it's not I'm disconnected. I'm so alienated.
So there's a way it can be a disconnection, and there's another way where. So again, you and I have talked about nature and how nature's perfect. It doesn't need to be fixed. So again, it's coming back to our real nature.
We're not there, Freeman. So to say to your child in your house who is afraid of whatever haunts her at night in her nightmares, that she is one with nature. We are human for a reason.
Right.
We are human in order to experience the separation from that knowledge.
Right.
And so to make a presumption that, to make those kinds of statements, they're mental. They're just ideas. They're not they aren't experiential. So much of what we hear in the world, particularly in our world, is not experiential. It's being
conceptual.
It's being disseminated by so many people who are doing it for their own reasons, reasons beautiful and true in service, but not necessarily personally experienced. So
Right.
I can't speak to what it is to be a part of nature except as a concept. And when I'm in nature, I have a sense of, well, it is all flowing together, but I don't operate from that. And
Well, so let me look. I don't want to get into a huge debate, or maybe we do. But the idea that when I'm in touch with nature and I'm in a grounded place, I see, or I call them sometimes top of the mountain moments, where I see the whole thing from a place of clarity. That's a beautiful place to get to. And I do think there are things in life that help me stay grounded. There are practices that help me stay grounded. There's a consciousness, even about my own thought process, which helps me pull out of a storyline or a trajectory that would take me way off track of where I want to come from.
But it's
right?
It is personal, and we tend to want to make the power.
It is personal.
We tend to want to offload the responsibility for what goes on in the world to second or third parties, to politicians, to what's going on in this country, what's going on in that country, and it's personal.
Well, that's an important point. So we're going to come back to this point that, again, we've said on this show before, take everything personally. We'll come back, we'll personalize this and talk about it, what it means to us here on Cutting Edge Consciousness. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Thanks for staying with us here on Cutting Edge Consciousness. This is Barnett. I'm here with Freeman. Before the break, we began to wander into this take everything personally conversation. And just to refresh for any of those listeners who have not heard us talk about this, we come back to it from time to time. There are those that say, we'll take nothing personally. And that's a very, very powerful developmental stage, so that to be in an environment or to be around family or to be in situations and where you get triggered. And we learn not to take things personally, that more often than not, I'll go as far as to say almost always, somebody says something and it's about them more than it is about you. When I say, Freeman, you're this, that, and the other thing, that's really about my own perceptions and not necessarily about you. So we learn to manage our emotions by not taking things personally. And then, just when we think we got a life handled and figured out, comes the next highest truth. Take everything personally. Listen, I don't know that this is ultimate, but it's certainly the way that we have been functioning. We have been operating, taking everything personally, everything as a shadow play, in the same way that if I was asleep right now, and everything that was going on in my dream, and I wouldn't know it's a dream, and then I'd wake up and I'd realize, well, the cars, the bus, the road, the little me in there, they were all me. I just didn't realize that they were all me in the dreaming. So we have made a practice out of doing that about real life. And whatever the value of it is, we have found, the ultimate value of it is, we have found value in doing that. It helps us become more and more responsible and do some kind of psychic and spiritual archaeology and dig up, well, what are the kinds of patterns that keep coming up? Whether that is ultimately true or not doesn't really matter. So we take everything personally. And if we were going to take this personally, these events in Syria and all this sort of bellicose talk, what would it bring up? How would that relate to you personally?
Well, so again, I want to just go back into the sort of delineation. That initial stage of sort of identifying myself and individuating, sort of pulling out of codependency by saying, okay, I'm not taking it personal. They're having their experience, and I'm able to differentiate. And then we start to realize, like, wow, okay, so I can start to see how I'm creating all of this. And I love the way you described it as a dream, because we often talk about the waking dream, where we realize that, at least at the level of perception, but we both believe it goes further than that, that there's a whole creative element, sort of the quantum perspective, where things are organizing around our expectations and our beliefs, and what is often called the observer effect. So in this context, how can I personalize this? How can I look at some themes, because it's so chaotic? And
so what are the themes?
well, the themes for me are...
Because we started with some of these themes, I think.
Yeah.
Performance and the
performance,
perfectionism and the status and...
For me, there's things where I start to find a lot of fear, like safety and security, and this whole idea of dominance and submission. And so in my life, where am I trying to dominate? And where am I trying to get people to submit to the way I want it to be? And where are all the little wars?
So let me
in
ask
my
you.
life?
Let me ask you an empowering question, at least in terms of empowering my own ability to better understand the whole process. When we talk about these wars, and when we talk about finding safety and finding security, that's really we begin to, or I begin to realize, as you're saying that's my overlay for all of life.
Yeah.
It's a constant overlay on everything. And is it an ultimate truth? I mean, if as is true that by now I am sufficiently aware that is my constant overlay, that if I don't dominate, if I don't resort to gunboat diplomacy at the end,
Right.
if I can make nice all the way along, but push come to shove, if I don't make threats and I'm not prepared to back them up, then I hold my safety and I hold the very fabric of reality of the world to be in jeopardy.
Yeah.
Is that ultimately true? We don't know. I mean, but what mitigates against us trying is the fear that it is not ultimately true, and that if we pull back on that and we simply feel the feelings and
That's it.
recognize them and as stories, and realize now, still mental, but nonetheless realize, well, nature doesn't operate that way, to go back to. That takes a tremendous amount of courage, and I don't expect, though that's a self-fulfilling limitation, I don't expect that as a matter of national policy, that is going to be, that is a road we'll take. But to the extent that I can do it in my own life, make more and more room in my own life to put the clutch in on the part of me that is constantly overlaying the need to dominate aspects of myself or others, however politely or however I do it in ways that, so I pretend that I'm not really doing that, in order to protect my own safety, my own needs. If I suspend the dominating, will I be taken care of? Will I flourish? Now,
So
the lesson
you
is
and I hold-
in nature, it happens.
Yes. So you and I hold that, yes, we will. But it is a little leap of faith, right? Because putting the clutch in on all the adaptive ways and all the things that we're hooked into in terms of our beliefs and how we've held the world, and our desire to control and manipulate it in the ways that we've been taught, the adaptive ways we've been taught, is two things. It's at once terrifying and liberating, right? So this putting the clutch in versus, I don't want to be so reactive. I don't want to go to war with the things that scare me.
Well, we already are.
Well, this is the internal. So I hang on for 1 second. I understand that we are. The idea that as things come up, my tendency to react, if I can put the clutch in, if I can breathe and pause and go, wow, okay. So that's up for me. I see it because it's being shown to me. It's being reflected in whatever is coming into my experience. The So the empowered response, from my perspective, is to get underneath it. I say love it. Love it is an empowering response. Can I get underneath it? Can I apply compassion? Can I look at it more deeply? Or do I hook on to a reactive interpretation and run with that, and then I'm at war with it, and then I'm taking sides. So look, the painful reflection, what's showing up, is a kind of chaos that's about dominance and submission and control and being right. That's the kind of insanity that I'm seeing reflected. And so, you and I would both say or maybe I won't talk for you, but from the consciousness that I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, so we don't want to go to war with that. We don't want to jump in and take sides. How do we begin to respond in a way that promotes peace versus run in with an agenda and then and try to dominate and control? Because
we've had instruction in this for many thousands of years, 2,000s of years. Jesus Christ said, consider mustard seeds. Our needs are met. It doesn't require a whole bunch of over-functioning. Nature is not over-functioning because nature is not operating on a cognitive level. It's not processing thought forms. The gift of being human is that we have a natural self, that's the body, and we also have this add-on of a cognitive self. And to find a balance between the two. But what happens to me, and what I see reflected in the world, is something beyond our capacity to handle in stride occurs, and then we become overwhelmed, and we default. We immediately leave the mustard seed. We leave the world of the natural. We leave the body.
Right.
We leave the sense of our feelings, of our emotions rather, and we go to feelings, which are very distinct from energy motion, the buzzing of aliveness, the sensation that occurs in a body at rest, and so that you know that you're alive. That thrum, we're not intimate with it at the best of times, but we get triggered, we go right out of the body, we go right into a head, and now we're not even incarnated. We're now in a world of thought forms. The solution to challenges is not inside the umbrage of thought forms. Thought forms do not have the ability it is not an expansive enough dimension to contain the responses to the challenges we now face. It's simply not big enough. And so thought forms cause us to kind of loop back in on itself. It consistently reframes events so that it can be responded to on its own terms. This being in the moment and being present and being in the now is a way to drop out of the love affair with the thought forms. Not to say that thinking is bad or wrong. It's absolutely imperative. It's absolutely critical. We're not leaving that behind. We're simply not leaving to thought alone the responsibility to meet the challenges of what is arising in the present. We're not in the present when we're in thought.
Right. I wonder what Sandy would say.
She would say, take a number of breaths and be alive in your body.
That's right.
And then allow the thinking to be a marriage, a dance of being and doing and being and doing.
I think that's true. I think that when we see this kind of chaos, it's frightening on a very simple level. It's frightening. And the response is often, at least in this case, to want to dominate and control it and fix it. And I think that I don't know what the appropriate response is. I mean, I'm not even going to pretend that I know how to respond to what is essentially tribal warfare. That's what's going on. The Middle East is these series of tribes that when they go into their tribal story and start playing out the separation between them, that there's an us and there's a them, I go, wow, that's terrifying. And to own it is, when do I go into my tribal warfare and go to war with the perceived them And when I see that and go, wow, how do I own this? Because that's how we started this segment.
So maybe you're saying, how is this a mirror
Totally.
of how I operate in the world?
Totally. So
Not to say, I know we're going to get responses that say, well, I am not a psychotic killer, and I am not. All of that is true. We're not suggesting that, but we are.
Well, we're all capable of it.
We are suggesting that there are patterns of engagement that I can more easily claim. I can no more claim that I am a psychotic mass murderer than I can claim that everything is perfect and we live in a non-dual state. But I can claim, when I look to the news and I hear our leaders saying, well, this is a matter of American prestige, I can claim that there are many hasty decisions that I have made in life for reasons that are not, that don't really stand up, for reasons that have to do with my own sense of status and ego and prestige, which is a cover for my own desire to control others.
Yeah, and when something painful in this collective body, the human experience throughout the world, when something painful flares up and our knee-jerk response is to try to snuff it out, fix it, or control it, it's precarious. I don't presume to know what the right decision is to make. I haven't the slightest clue. I just know that, what you're saying I think is really valuable, that we always make it about us. We always make it about us. And there's a constructive way to make it about us, where we go, how do I take this personally? How do I respond?
It's a paradox.
And there's this destructive way about making it about us, where it's all about our ego and how does it look? How do we look in the world with this going on?
That's the most powerful thing that has been said on the show today and in many days.
Yeah.
This paradox of both owning that it is about us and having the discernment to know when it is about my individual ego and when it is about what can I give in terms of insight to my process that is beyond my ego.
And how do I want to be with what's showing up? How do I want to be? There has to be a way of internalizing and personalizing it so that I can make an empowered response. Otherwise, I'm just scared and I'm reacting. I'm just overwhelmed and I'm quickly throwing. I mean, again, listening to the talk show this morning, these throwing in solutions from the pundits, from these people on the radio. And I'm like, really? Like the decision making can't come from that place. This has to be deep and thoughtful. It has to be felt in order to be a wise decision. And I have concern that the part that I see that's controlling and making decisions in this context may not come from that space. With that, I think we have to take a break.
Are we coming back?
We are coming back.
Well, then, we're going to step away for a minute. Don't you step away. We'll be back right after these words.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with Barnett Bain.
Having my drink. I couldn't do it during the break. We'd have to wait until we come back. Because
That's right.
It's all about time management. I'm in the moment.
We are very in the moment. So it's interesting. It's kind of a somber. I'm left with a somber feeling like, I like to be contemplative about these things. I like to take time to go, how do I want to respond to what's showing up? Because again, I've learned the pause button is really important. And how do I, again, see what's being reflected back that I can own in my own life so I can come from a consciousness that's compassionate and understanding and ultimately, love it is the only constructive choice from my perspective, is how do I get underneath it and around it so I can be part of what's on the other side of whatever this pain is that we have to go through, because that's what's showing up. It's painful. It's chaotic. It feels like the world is in this crazy flux, and what do we hang
What
on
an
to?
opportunity.
At the end of the day, I believe you're right. What an opportunity.
And the opportunity starts in the hearts of each individual.
Yes.
It's not about,
That's it.
I'm not waiting for it to happen someplace else in order for, but it's an opportunity to see, well, here is this chaos. It can be frightening chaos. It can equally be beautiful chaos.
Yeah.
But it's a sign, as you pointed out, that the way that I have been holding things in my own psyche, not in the world psyche,
Right.
in my own psyche. Psyche, once upon a time, psychology, the root of psychology is psyche. Once upon a time, that was not about understanding brain function. Psyche refers to soul craft.
Yeah.
So when we are in our soul path, we're in our bodies. We checked up on that quote during the break, and I've already lost it. It was, consider the lilies of the fields. They don't toil, they don't struggle, and yet they're clothed more beautifully than Solomon.
You did it.
I sort
brought
of
it
did
back.
it, right?
That's
so
really
it was
good.
gifted to me. And so this
I
is...
think that's from Matthew's Gospel.
It's
I don't
from...
remember.
I don't remember where it's from.
Yeah,
but in any case, it is an instruction about the rightful place of ruminative thinking. Ruminative thinking has no rightful place. It is a recipe for struggle and a recipe for toil, as very much a different experience than being fully present, as nature is, in the moment, in the body, alive with the vibrancy and the vitality of life, feeling it. And that in itself is a portal to a wilder, juicier imagination that is open to more possibility and more of what comes naturally as grace, as flight to an eagle. That's grace. It's a gift that comes into our ability to be lucid livers, lucid dreamers. And then suddenly we are open to what looks like miraculous developments that expand the whole dream. And we are not simply rummaging around in the toolkit in our own basement looking for a solution from the past that I can bring forward into the moment. We are growing and making more alive and wilder our juicy living imagination.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Because, look, lots of things in the chaos, which is part of transformation. We've covered that many times, that chaos is part of transformation, that there's always this way in which operating systems have to come apart in a particular way. And, this might makes right operating system, this, ego trip operating system, even the operating system of projecting it out and saying, it's the world out there. See, it's the world. This is the world, this is the way of the world. And then in that context, I'm a victim of it. And I'm fighting to control it and do it my way because there's an enemy. And we realize the enemy is within. It's all me. I'm what's right with the world and I'm what's wrong with the world that I see. And it's all about how do I respond in an empowered way, not as a headship.
That's why we're alive.
Not as a headship, but as a way that I'm in it. This whole felt experience, this human experience is messy. And so it's not about disengaging and just coming from a concept in my head, as you noted earlier. I don't want it to be conceptual. I want to be present to what's coming up. I want to, this is terrifying, and be with that in a way that's constructive, meaning I want to love it. And then I want to come from that place versus just allowing my reactive tendencies to run the show. And then I'm at war with that which is in me that I don't like.
And, part of the war is when I hear that, as much as it is so central to my belief system after 30 years of loving into this, I am still very aware of the voice in my head, the internal voice in my, obviously the voice in my head is internal. The voice in my head that says, well, that is intellectually dubious. The voice of my ego that has been running things out of its own very limited worldview and toolkit and is hanging on and uses thought forms in a disintegrated way in order to dominate and control and keep an imagination highly, highly structured. So I hear from it, and it says, well, that's intellectually dubious because it operates in the intellect. It has made the intellect a supreme deity. It has substituted its own intellect, its own skills, intellectual skills for a relationship with the divine. And I hear it, I'm aware of it, and yet still I can swallow the Kool-Aid. I can go down that road again. And
well, we said it before in the show, we won't think our way out of our unhealthy patterns of thinking.
That's right. That's beautifully said.
Well, that's the quote we have up on our Facebook page.
And we will not outthink life,
That's
neither.
That's it. And that this is a painful flare-up, and that it's something that represents the chaos. And what does that mean to me personally? How do I respond to this personally?
So how are you responding to it personally, may I ask?
I think personally, I feel it. It scares me. I'm aware that it's scary. I see feedback, in some of these mirrors I've set up for myself, Facebook pages, YouTube responses. This video will go out and we'll get all kinds of feedback there. And so I go, wow, interesting.
But how are you responding? How are you responding
so go
to
back
it,
to
not reacting to it?
So go back to the very beginning of the show. This idea of being present, of being really present to what's showing up. And very consciously, can I put down my agenda? Can I be present? This may sound out of context, but I think it fits. I've been doing, as you know, more corporate training. I have a training coming up next week, and I really want to be sure I listen, be sure I'm offering value to the people. I've rehearsed all the things.
How do you know when you're listening?
Well, so it's interesting because I don't want to go too far into this and get too formulaic, but there's an intention that allows me to be more conscientious of people around me, more conscientious of their needs. And really, it almost sounds trite, but in a position where I want to serve. I want to offer something that's going to be of value to them. And so that sort of guides the day, right?
It does guide the day, and I'm wondering how it ties in to responding to the present moment.
Yeah.
By being in the body. I mean, what is the experience of it as an embodied experience?
Yeah, so you said something to me about this. I said, we were talking this morning, and you were talking about this topic of Syria, and I said something like, it's a big mess. And you said, yeah, but in a but that can all shift very quickly with a consciousness that responds to it, that holds a possibility that it could all come to something positive. I don't want to make this wishful thinking.
Well, I think you're right on the money here.
Yeah.
But the possibility is not held in the mental band.
That's right. That's right.
It's held in our ability to stay, to be aware of the past, to have a sense of hope, which is a paradox, because how can you have a sense of hope and still be present, fully present? It's some kind of embodied, I'm exploring this, so I certainly don't have answers, but I am increasingly aware of the thrum of my own body, the sensation of aliveness that is not necessarily, oh, wait a second. I have something very brief to kind of share and illuminate to this point. So okay. I was reading something that Eckhart Tolle wrote, and he is speaking to this point. He says, imagine that you are down on the floor peering into a little mouse hole in the wall, and you're waiting for the mouse to come out, but it's not a mouse that you're waiting to come out, it's a thought. So imagine that you can put your clutch in on your thinking. A thought is going to come any minute, but you're just attentive, looking at that hole, waiting for the thought to emerge. Can you do that right now?
Sure.
So there is more aliveness right there.
Yeah.
You didn't go, it's not like putting your computer on sleep. You're totally aware. You're totally present.
Well, this is very similar to what you were saying about putting the clutch in.
Yes, it is.
I'm putting the clutch in on my patterns of thinking. I'm running ahead to all the solutions I've seen before, versus being with what's coming up in a way that allows me to, in the next moment, have a different response to it. Not how I've responded in the past, but something organic and
The
new.
response that comes through as well is not coming in the ways that we have been socialized to
Absolutely.
experience. That
Yeah.
it is coming in from entirely new portals of connection to mystery.
Yeah. So the word that comes to mind, I brought it up earlier, maybe off air. Everything is blending together right now. I've
It's all the
lost
same.
track of
Off air, on
when
air,
are we
night,
on air?
day,
Who
daydreams,
knows?
night dreams.
But about humility.
Mm-hmm.
I've been really aware of how important humility is.
Mm-hmm.
Because that part of me that wants to control, that arrogant guy who's got an agenda, who's or desperate. It's that, because they're very similar. My arrogant.
How do you define it, humility?
So it's, I think it's a presence. I think it's a slowing down. I think it's, again, connecting to other modulators, heart, for example, or gut, having more of an embodied experience of like, wow, I'm able to put the clutch in on my thinking. I'm able to put the clutch in on my patterns enough so that something new can arise. And I think it comes out of an intentionality. Again, it's a consciousness where...
It's an intentionality to hold no intention.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. There's a paradox again. But yes, I think that's right. That there's again, hope and faith, that there is something that is positive and good that is going to come out of this, that there's something in nature when we can allow the natural to play out, that it's okay. It's okay. I don't need to run and fix it. I think this analogy of putting the clutch in, but not putting the clutch in as a reactive response. Well, I know what to do here. I'll put the clutch in. It's a place we come to where all of our thinking is going on. All of our fixing and solving is going on. And we go, oh, I can't get there from here.
It's also, it's an understanding that my imagination as socialized, structured in the way that it has been, even though it has been structured that way, in the very next instant, it can all be different. Even though every crow I've ever seen has been black, I have enough humility to know in the very next instant, my imagination can be juiced up by aspects of me and aspects that are not me.
Yeah.
To be juicy enough so that in the very next instant I could see a white one. I don't hold on to my knowing. I don't grasp it so tightly that it can't all change in the very next moment. That is a powerful experience of humility that works for me.
I love it.
That makes it alive and real for me.
Yeah. And can we imagine a possibility? Just a possibility. Again, my mindset or the patterning of my mind, again, is to track back and hold things so very narrowly, especially if they're scary to me. But can I just put the clutch in the fear enough? Is there just enough faith and hope and enough humility to put the clutch in just enough that in the next moment a possibility can arise that helps to resolve the turmoil internally and then hopefully externally?
Well, we have, what is that, 4 minutes, 3 minutes?
You're done.
2 seconds? We're done. So very briefly before we're done, I want to offer one technique that is working really well for me.
Please.
So to your point about holding the fear, I'm not looking to try and annihilate the fear. But fear is a frequency, and so I'm holding the fear, and I'm adding to the fear. It's almost like a homeopathic drop. I'm adding to the fear a sense of hope. I'm not trying to diminish the fear. The fear is there. But along with the fear, I'm adding, there's also the possibility that this humility, that there is more forces on heaven and earth, and I can have some hope that I add into it as well. And just that changes the resonance. And we're creating reality out of what we fear the most and what we desire the most.
Beautiful. And with that, we
desire
desire that you keep coming
you'll
back.
come back next week. Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you then.